Hi, and welcome to Painters Motivating Painters Reviews, where we see how many times I can use the word like in 1 hour. And also maybe give people constructive feedback on their miniatures so that they can progress in the hobby if we have time for that. Does that sound good, Jim?
It sounds very, very nice.
Cool. We've got a lot of great pieces of art in our June event from Facebook. I'm sure Jim has it up there for you now. So we'll get straight into it. So, Arthur Gers or Jers, this is my first try of OSL in half a year painting. Try to improve the TMM and get something interesting. Your opinion would be great. Yeah. This is really, really good, especially for like half a year. I think it's really taken all the boxes for me on terms of the OSL. You've got a really nice like shadow that like it goes into shadow before the OSL kicks in, and then you've reserved the brightest lights for the actual lightning and the sources of the light. I think it looks particularly good, like on the shield, in the lightning bolts that are coming out of it. Like in the photos, they actually genuinely look like they're glowing, and you've even got a bit of a glow on his eyes, which is really really nice as well. And it's a great choice of colors as well. How you've done the kind of cold shadows, which then lends it to that lightning, electric blue kind of effect. Um, where I think you might be able to improve on terms of the TMM is on the other side where it's all fully lit, because you can see over there there's a lot less kind of visual interest because it's all more or less gold. So you could still use your cold shadows there in like places like in between his shoulder and his like collar thing, and in like under the shield, and places that would be naturally in shadow, even though the light is coming from over there, they'll be like cast shadows. And you can use your cold blue kind of cut shadows there, just like but less so than on the shadow side, if that makes sense. And you could do a couple of little small things like calling out some of these like rivets and things with that cold shadow under them, and then maybe doing like a big round highlight on the top of the shoulder pad because it's a very big domed area, because you kind of have the same amount of light and shadow across all the goals, but obviously certain areas would have more light because they're kind of facing upwards. But like really, for 6 months of painting, like I wouldn't have, like most people aren't even tackling OSL, and they just slap on paints and think it's the TMM's going to do the job. So great work altogether. I look forward to seeing more from you in the future. Hopefully that was helpful for you, Arthur. Jim?
Yeah, smashing it for 6 months. It's really good, Arta. Very impressive. There's a couple of areas where you could do with a bit more saturation, like on the ground here, where this lightning bolt has hit the ground, so it's a little bit desaturated there. The OSL's not selling as strong as some other areas. As Matt said, I think the eyes are the best, along with the shield. I do think in general though the OSL is a bit overpowering. Like how you've executed it's quite good. Like where the highlights are, where the shadows are. But I just think in general, his armor is that gold from the back, and he's lit that well from the back. Like then from the front, he looks basically like he's in blue armor. It's just a little bit too much. So I would dial it right back, and just really minimise the blue that's appearing on the armor on the front side of him, and just literally reserve it for a little strip that's in the shadowed areas. So don't have it anywhere near any upward facing panels because it wouldn't be that bright. But overall, it's really really good. But less is more sometimes with OSL, especially when you're starting out. But this is a really solid swipe at it, and you should be proud. It's very good. The only other thing I had, was when you're doing this effect with the lightning, that's really thick wire or whatever you've used for that. So, I mean, it's not always the easiest thing to get hold of, but it looks like wire that you've used there. But if you take an old like charging cable, like a USB cable, something like that, and strip that out, you'll find that it's not actually a single core of copper like what you're using here. It's actually loads, like dozens of tiny strands. And then you can pick out those individual strands. They're very, very fiddly to work with. But at this scale, especially with like Stormcast, they're not that big. That would be a much nicer scale of wire to use. So try that out next time. But yeah, for a first wipe, this is really good, Arta. So hats off to you. Great job. Thank you very much. Please come again. Moving on to Tony, painting just under 2 years and wants to start entering competitions. Spent 3 months on these guys and want to know where still need a lot of improvement. Thinks the NMM is still very weak, so plan to work on that, and the base is not to the same standard. So I think the composition and the contrast on this are actually mostly really good. Can tell you spent a lot of time on areas like the blue, the travel that you've got in there, the surface noise that you've put into them, because they're very smooth models. These is really, really nice, especially on the blue. It looks really, really good. The underneath of them isn't as well contrasting, I don't think. It looks a lot flatter. It's nice that you've used a different colour for the underneath of the squeakies. But I think you should go to that. So if you want to go competition, we've got to be harsh with you. It's got to be the level. This blue is competition standard, definitely ready. But the underneath of them is not the same quality, so you need to match the two. The red to a certain extent as well, I think. Just let me flip round to another one. It's not quite got the vivid colour and the pop to it. And there's an area down here where there's like this really bright red, and it doesn't really match in with like the rest of it. So I don't know if that's like an error or whether it's just the paint's come out a bit better there. I'm not sure. But yeah, the blue for me is absolutely killing it. Red and underneath of them not so much. So whatever you've done with the blue, just transpose those skills and that execution to the other colours and you'll be great. Separation is another area where you could improve. So that is to say, like, wherever one surface or element touches another one, you need a very, very thin, dark line. Good ways to do this are thinned out washes or thinned out contrast paints, or better yet, but a bit tricky to get into, oil paints. So especially for competition, oils will be a big friend. You've got a very long working time with them. They're very forgiving. You can work with them for a long time. They're not going to dry. They're very easy to get rid of. Just make sure that they are varnished first once you've done the acrylic work. Varnish them, then move into your oils. Otherwise, you're going to spoil it when you're working with your thinners and stuff for the oil. NMM wise, I thought it was pretty good. To be honest, just trying to find a better shot of it. Yeah, it's pretty good. You could probably just push the shadow contrast a bit more on it in some places, like the underneath and where it sort of curves around away from the light. Just push some more shadow. But yeah, in general, I think it's definitely selling as metal. Like the weapons as well are quite good. They're quite small as well, so you've got good like travel in the contrast on them. So that's nice. Then the final thing I had for these was teeth and claws. So just picking out super thin, like sharper lines going up the horns. It's there to a certain extent. It's just a bit choppy and scratchy on the teeth, which you'll probably get away with for like a battered squeaky teeth. You might get away with it, but it just looks like on this red one you could definitely do with, even if it's just adding a bit more saturation and colour to them to make it stand out a little bit more, shape the tooth as well. They are quite nicely shaped models anyway, but just push it a little bit more with the colour and I think you'll be good. The skins on the green guys is pretty good as well. You've got some nice tones in there, flesh tones where you'd expect to see them. That's nice. So yeah, and I wasn't too upset by the base. I thought that was quite good. Depending on the competition, the judges, whatever, they might not even really look at it. So, I don't think it's too much to sweat on the base. It's looking good. So yeah, I hope that helps, Tony. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I agree with Jim. I think the blue is a much higher standard. I think what's really helping is that it's not just one color. You've got like blue and it's shaded down to purple and it goes up into kind of like a cyan or like a yellow kind of tinge to it. And it gives it a lot more depth. Whereas the red is it's more red into red kind of thing. I do like the way you have the transitions on the body between the red and the kind of peach tone, like skin color for the underbelly. But I think where it's kind of weaker is the big chin because it's just like one big area where it's all the same kind of tone. So if you worked some of that purple in like underneath the lip and like around the like chin bit, that would do a lot to just break up that area and make it look a bit more interesting. I'd also consider giving them the same color eyes because I think I prefer the yellow eyes to the green ones and try and get a dot in there if you can. And
Yeah, you can.
yeah, just it stands out. And I wouldn't sweat the NMM too much. Like for these guys, it's not meant to be super shiny. And it's not a great model to be doing NMM on anyway, because these chains can't like physically exist like this in real life. Like the inside bit of them, like the linky bit, is all full of plastic. So you would have to like paint shadows on there to show a hole, which is like very fiddly and annoying. I think that's fine. Um, I'd do more on the base personally, even if it's just in terms of painting it. Like the skulls are a bit like flat. I like your two random turnips in the back. Uh, I don't think you need to do like a whole lot of like sculptural stuff on there because it's already got so much going on. But just like maybe like a little bit more on the painting. Uh, Maybe give the leaves of the turnips a bit of like a a different color and have like a little bit of a drop shadow under them or something like that. But like Jim said, it depends a lot on the competition. Like some people would just be like grass and two tufts, it's fine. But yeah, they're looking really good. Next up, we got Korovic, a person. Sorry for not being able to say your name. Challenging myself, first vignette with the background, trying to get under high atmosphere, grim dark with contrasting magenta neon light source. Okay, very cool. Very high end painting here, especially on the figure. We can see with like all the super shiny kind of NMM style stuff, and the fabric work and all that, and then the scenery is also extremely well made. I love the way you've got like the fans picked out and that little teeny tiny keypad with the numbers and stuff ringing up on it. It's a really lovely detail. Obviously the kind of elephant in the room is this giant sign that says bar. That is your glowing neon sign, and I think it's a little bit awkward in that it's drawing a huge amount of attention because it's such a bright color and because it's so intentionally saturated, and it's drawing attention away from your figure. Like you've effectively got a spotlight pointed over your figure's head. So like if the bar sign was behind her and she was on like a gantry or something, then it would draw attention into her. But as it is, it makes you look up above it. Um, I think to be honest with you, if you just literally look at the picture and you scroll down until sort of you see from the pipe down and you've got a little bit of the magenta coming down, I think that's a stronger composition because it puts more focus on the figure. Also, when you're doing just this is sort of a technical thing about the OSL, it's got a very circular pattern to it, but the light source is actually more like a rectangle. Like if you were to simplify that bar sign, it's like this, and you don't get a circular light coming out of a rectangular light source. It's going to be like a rectangle with the edges rounded off. And also the wall is a lot lighter in the upper section. So you'd expect the OSL to be like disappear much quicker as it travels up the wall. I think it looks really good down below catching on the door. Um, you could also just be a little bit careful on some of the pipes. It's like on the parts of the pipe that face out, whereas it should be on the parts strongest on the parts of the pipe that face towards the sign. You've got it in some places, but in others it's not quite as noticeable. But yeah, I just think it's a cool idea. But you kind of got two things that are fighting for our attention, and it's kind of a shame because the figure is like so nicely painted. Like I love the leopard skin print on her dress in such fine detail, the really shiny trousers, and then you've even got a bit of the OSL on her. Um, but yeah, I mean, it could just be a personal taste thing. Like they're both two cool pieces put together in one. So great work all around. Jim, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, it is a challenge, isn't it? Because the neon bar sign does look cool. Like the way it's been executed, notwithstanding the slight accuracy of how the light falls that Matt said, like it does look really nice. It does look cool. You've done a really nice job on it, and the figure is lovely as well. So putting the two together, it is a challenge. You'd have to paint it like really aggressively dark and make most of like this the primary light source, I think, to really gel them together, which obviously is not going to happen now. So for this piece, I think you're fine. You like people can see it for what it is. It's a cool setting. I think like painting wise, I would probably you mentioned grimdark in it, so I'd probably use more like streaking grime and weathering to batter this wall up a little bit more, make it look a bit more aged. Like you've got some nice browns and stuff, oranges going around the bottom. Don't really see much in the way of streaking, and for that gritty cyberpunky grimdark feeling, like the stripping, and even like paint flaking would be really nice as well. There could be just because it's aged, or there could be like, you know, a couple of bullet holes, or, you know, a dent or something where something's happened. You make the story, it doesn't matter. Have some paint flaking, like you can have different layers of paint, you know, primer behind it or whatever, showing through, something like that, just to add a little bit more gnarliness to the wall. But like execution of painting all the way around it, really, really tidy. NMM's great. Small details, as Matt said, beautiful. So yeah, very, very nice stuff overall. Korovic, thank you very much. Okay, gonna swing on up to not safe for work miniatures now. Another one, just been painting about 2 years. Didn't have a very big collection of paint or brushes until recently. Just interested in painting beautiful skin tones, faces, and eyes, as these are the areas of main focus and where I want to improve. So this is a very small pewter miniature. Fair play for taking on pewter. I hate them. I like working on old school pewters. So got a large collection of KDMs as well, but haven't painted any of that yet. Okay, so I like the colours and the composition. The skin needs a little bit more contrast, I would say, towards the shadow end. So when we talk about the values, we obviously got our scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the brightest highlight, 5 being the deepest shadow. So yours is kind of skimming around in like the 4 to 2 range, which is quite common. Pushing the contrast is scary, especially on female skin, because it's so smooth, and you know, when you get a good tone to it, you don't want to wreck it. But I do think you need to push shadow, contrast, and highlights on this a bit. Some areas do look really flat in these pictures, like the arm. So like you could have you could definitely push the this is mostly just like 3, and it needs that full range of contrast. Not on every single element of it, but on the figure as a whole. So definitely push skin contrast for me. That'd be cool. It looks like you've got some unwanted texture as well. So careful keeping your palette, your brush clean. Paint nice and thin. All that sort of stuff applies. I mean, she's very, very small, as we can see as well. So bit of forgiveness for that. It's mostly come from the pewter as well. Sorry, I forgot you said pewter. It's probably mostly that. You can research undershading as well with certain colours in skins. You know, don't think you've got to go, right, here's my base skin tone for Caucasian and then shade it and highlight it. You can actually paint the entire thing a completely, like, seemingly an obscure colour. Olive green is a nice one to give like a very tanned and healthy sort of skin tone, especially for females. So do some research into undershading for skin. There's certain areas, especially in faces, you would do that are completely different. You know, some areas would be like yellow, others would be blue undershading, others would be completely red, like around here. And then you start applying like your base skin tones over it. So if you want to really, really dial in on your skins, to have a look at the undershading. I won't go into the whole thing now because it's long, but it's a really, really good technique. Tidy up the base rim was another one that I had. I know that the pink line is probably deliberate, but it just looks a little bit scratched up and battered like the base rim, so maybe file that down next time, make sure it's nice and smooth. And then amazing work on the eyes. They are really, really tidy. Really, really good. Just wanted to point that out. Very, very nice work on that. And the hair as well, the good highlighting on the hair, that's nice. And then the last thing I had was that you could probably add some texture to the wood, either wood grain or like sponge or stipple on, just like black and white, and then glaze over it with your wood colour again. Then once it's glazed, do it a second time, stipple or sponge in black and white dots or lines, hashes, whatever. Then go over it another once with the wood tone. It gives you then like a couple of different layers of variety to the wood. It never looks good when it's just a flat brown. It just doesn't sell. But on the whole, really, really, really lovely. So well done for taking on these pewters and making them look so pretty. Nice one, Matt.
Yeah, I think you said pretty much absolutely everything I was going to say. So yeah, good work. In terms of your Kingdom Death, guys, don't worry too much about it. Worst case scenario, you paint the figure and you end up with something you don't like, and then you can just leave it on your shelf and come back and paint it again some other time. And you might want to check out if you're interested in doing kind of high-end skin tone on really small figures. Jose Da Vinci is really good for that. He has like that video he paints some dark elf lady, and like it's pretty amazing. I'd check that out. And also that's on YouTube, and then which you're on right now. And then Ayala 13 did a bunch of like kind of chibi models. I'm not sure if he's still active anymore, but like similar kind of style to what you're doing, so you might want to check that out as well. But great work for 2 years, and keep it up. Keep up the good work. Next we got Alessandro Preside Universitario. Planning on doing a pond of green glowing sludge. Couldn't do too much on the underglow because you're worried about ruining the paint job. Okay, well don't worry. It is a very, very nice paint job. I really like the color composition, the way you've got this like gold to purple and everything's in those kind of two tones, and it's a great contrasting scheme, and it really lends itself to this like demon queen kind of look. Could you go stronger on the green glow? Yeah, absolutely. If that's what you want to do. Like, if you hadn't pointed it out to me, I'm not sure I would have even noticed it was there, to be honest with you. At this stage, it's looking kind of like the green underlight you might get if you were standing in a field and like there's grass. But even then, like if you look at a football match, like everyone has actually green like necks and chins and stuff because it can be pretty strong. What I'd recommend doing is do your pool of sludge and see how bright that's going to be. Make sure it's brighter than your cast light, and then see how far you want it to go in terms of intensity and travel on the model. I think you've got it in the right places. You know, it's in places where she's casting shadow, so it's going to be kind of like a an edge light in there. You could have a bit more, I think, on this skirt thing where it's like wrapping under, because that would cast shadow on itself. And then you could even have a bit on the NMM gold like demon face in her like crotch or whatever, because just for an edge highlight, because the gold will pick up the glow from a further distance. But yeah, I'd say do the green base first, and then see, sort of just like take it up a level until you're happy with it. And then in terms of just generic stuff, I think she's extremely well painted. I think the NMM looks great. I think the cloth looks great. Skin looks really good. I think the horns are a bit weaker. They've got a bit of a scratchy kind of texture to them that could be smoothed out a bit more. And then the wings are similarly like just a bit like, I think they could do with a little bit more saturation, like some red maybe in along the kind of finger bones that are in there, and then a little bit more highlight on the claws. And they're kind of, again, it's because you're using very desaturated colors. They've got this kind of like dusty kind of feel to them. So if you went for like a saturated brown, like a charred brown or whatever it's called for the base of the claw, and then did like a near white just like strip highlight, that would look really good. I think the tailbone and everything, that looks really good. So I mean, you could go for that kind of effect as well. But yeah, it's a great looking figure. I wouldn't worry too much about ruining it with the OSL. Just like put the pool in, and then kind of put the OSL as you feel is appropriate, and then just stop when you think it's getting too much. Jim?
Yeah, where's the pool going to go is my question. Is it going to be on this little bit of rock, or is this part of a larger diorama or base or setting or something? If you're worried about it, Alessandro, what I would say is keep it minimal. So, as Matt said, get a pool going somehow, even if it's just temporary using cork or whatever. Paint it up nice and bright and green. And then I would recommend you keep all OSL off anything above her knees. Simple as that. So all of this where you've got up on her body and up on the thigh here, don't worry about any of that. It's over complicating it. Just put it in a very, very specific place, like the pool. Let's just, for argument's sake, say it was here, and then you're going to have a circle of effect where it's going to be, having a cast glow on the model. So it doesn't need to be anywhere near thighs or rib cages or hands or even up on this loincloth. Just below the knees, anywhere that's in shadow. Just keep it really, really simple. If it's, if it's worrying you that much, then less is more with OSL. Like, there's a little bit going on with this tail thing here, but if it's in front of it, obviously it's not going to be shining here. But that's going to be completely dependent on where the pool ends up. But if I was going to try it, I'd keep it very, very small, very bright, and then Yeah, keep it in the shadows below her knees and see how you get on. Good luck. Let us know how it goes. All right, next up is Drake with this mad pirate thing. Been trying to learn NMM with this model. I was trying for some different types of metal, like an older worn metal for the cannon and a nice sharp looking blue tinted metal for the axe blade, as well as trying to get a glass looking effect with the bottle hanging from the waist. So yeah, good shot at taking on all of these things, especially all at once. I think the glass sells pretty well. The glass has extremely like aggressive highlights on it when it's super shiny, so you don't need to worry about blending stuff. So I'd even sharpen up some of these lines even more. But other than that, yeah, it sells as glass. I could tell straight away what you were going for. Older, rustier metal. I don't think you're quite there on the cannon yet. That looks very, very clean and shiny and highly polished. So use browns to glaze it down. Well, you could use wash, what's it called, Agrax Earthshade, or Dark Tone, or Strong Tone, or whatever it's called, from another manufacturer. But get some tones on this, and then you want to be adding sort of oranges or reds, or sort of ruddy browns in certain patches to create like a rust, and put some streaks in it. That's how you make metal look old. It's got to have lots of browns and oranges in it. Random patterns where water would like normally collect, so in recesses around bolts or rivets, or blatant holes that are inside it. That's how you weather it up. So have a go at that. The axe blade, I think, what did I have for the axe blade? It could have a little bit more shadow in it. Let's find a nice picture. There we go. So it's a nice run of colour. Nice bright highlight, nice and smooth transition, but just where these shadows are, I'd just darken that a little bit more. It doesn't even have to be on both of them, but it kind of goes from your light intensity is like 1 down to like 4, back up to 1 again, down to 4. You haven't got the 5, you haven't got that full range yet. So you've got your brightest highlight down through the midtones to 4, but you're not getting a deep shadow in it just yet. So just one of these shadows I would deepen down to a 5. But like the effects, like nice crisp white edge highlight, that's really good. So that's lovely. Then in general, for the rest of it, I think you've done a nice job. There's a lot of details, a riot of colour, but I think it's reasonably well balanced. I think what would just help it like pop is just separating the elements a bit. So trying to get in with some dark tones and separate like all the scales. Some of the scales seem to have like a coverage issue as well. You've got some of the like the skin tone showing through like on the edges of the scale. So like, and then there's some blue in those gaps as well. So just tidying those up, but that's just brush control practice. So just try and keep an eye on that sort of cleanliness for future improvement. Take your time. It goes an awful long way. It really does. I've just noticed his name is Slash. Nice freehand slash on there as well. It's cool. Yeah, but nice work overall. Thanks. I will hand you to Matt.
Yeah, he's a cool looking troll pirate or whatever he is. I know you didn't ask about this, but for me, the biggest thing that kind of stood out, I was actually looking at this on my phone at night when it went into black and white, because it does that. And the vest, like, because you got this kind of blue vest, it's very similar in kind of tone to his skin tone, and then you got a slightly different blue for his hat, and then he has like this kind of cyan blue for his chin spikes. I just think the vest would look better in a different color, either in the purple you've done for his trousers or for like gray or something, just because it would define everything a bit better. But as Jim said, also getting in and doing those edges, this is very chunky fabric. Like, he's wearing that's got to be like like an inch thick. In reality, it would be like wearing a giant cardboard box. So you want to do all the edges kind of darker, but I think just for yourself will be easier. Everything would be easier to paint if you didn't have a blue shirt on blue skin, if that makes sense. Also on your NMM, I think there's a really good video by Squidmar. If you look up Squidmar Easy NMM or something or other like that, he does like a scimitar blade, and he does the same kind of thing as you're doing, and it's like his trick for you do a rusty flat and then like a shiny edge, and he'll show you all the colors that you can use to make that look really good. But I think the NMM on the Canon for me looks really good. I think I really like the way you've captured like the you've got the highlights on the outside and then on the inside and the reverse, and it's very convincing looking. So fair play for that. Thanks for submitting. Hopefully we gave you some useful feedback on that. Next we got Mark Walter. Not happy with the two skin tones, not blending. Gonna go back and redo them at some point. Okay, yeah. Photos are like very foggy and kind of hard to tell what's going on, but we'll deal with that. What should I have here? Yeah, so it's a good kind of scheme. He's like a gnoll or some sort of D&D monster guy. He's very filthy looking. Kind of reminds me of the Hobbit films. I think the dual skin tone is fine. It's like you don't need to have it be perfect, like blended out. Like a lot of the time you see animals that have two tones, it just goes straight from one into another. And it is a bit slightly weird the way you've placed them, though. I think like you have it on like his bicep, but it's like here, whereas you would expect like the paler colors would be on like the inside, and then similarly on his legs, you have it on the back of his legs, but not like on his inner thighs. And also one of the things like we'd often recommend doing that kind of two-tone skin for figures who are like nude, like wearing like just like a big troll that has like a loincloth or whatever. Whereas he's got quite a lot of clothes on. So it's a little bit confusing then in places where like he's got that rip in his armor and you've got this kind of orange brown color that is his skin under there, but then you've got this gray color for his skin in other places. So it's just not 100% clear whether that is his skin because it's also similar to these different patchy tones of leather that you have for his armor as well, if that makes sense. I think like yeah, just think about where you're putting them to make it really clear that that's what's happening. So from every view, we should be able to see like, oh, he does have two different skin tones going on there, because just to avoid any kind of confusion. So you could put it like on his knees and things as well, just to be like the skin is thinner there, like the bases of his feet and stuff, and just even it out around the place. Yeah, and that way we'd kind of have a better sense of all the different materials. I think I really like the way you've done his face. Like it's quite characterful. You've got a big expression in there, and like the eyes as well are very good. Like I think this is quite a small figure, so I think you've done a really good job. And it's great how you've got all these very neutral tones, but then the eyes being yellow, like really draw attention up there. And I think it's a good look there. So hopefully that was of help. I'm sure Jim will have a bit more to say.
Yeah, of course. So, what you can do when you've got two skin tones coming to each other, whichever was the darker one, so in this case the grey, you could put some little dots, just like look like freckles. So, and they do them in sort of rows, just like a couple of rows, and there's more of them closer to the darker side of the skin, if that makes sense, and then a bit further away there'd be less. It just gives like a kind of fadey kind of effect. But yeah, I agree with everything Matt said. It's a little bit confusing where the two-tone skin is. So next time, just try and plan it out a little bit better, like with the armor slash that's there. I completely agree with that point. It's a really good point. But yeah, other than that, it's cool. The sculptor's a bit soft on the fur, so you can try and paint like a pattern in the fur next time. That would be quite cool. But yeah, all in all, for such a small dude, yeah, I think you've done a pretty good job with it. So nice one, Mark. Moving up then to Alexis. Once again, going for a competition piece and need the feedback. So loading both barrels for you, Alexis. Let's have it. So it's lovely. It's very, very nice. It's really, really lovely. I love the NMM on the helm and the bracelet and the sword to a slightly lesser extent, though. It doesn't seem quite as refined on the sword blade, like these reflections here. 1, 2, 3. They're the same size. They're the same intensity. You want to vary that up a lot, like you have done with the helm and the bracer. So just watch out for that side of the sword. What else did I have? Separation in general, I don't think is quite there on the back of it. So where this fur meets this cape, which is really, really beautifully rendered, like the fur, like, oh, that's so nicely painted. But there's just this, it doesn't stand apart from the cape. You've got this like really bright highlight running down there. So I think if you could just set those two bits apart, that would be really, really, really helpful. The NMM on the back of the helm as well isn't quite to the same standard, so you might want to push that a little bit more. Same for the highlights and the wings. I wasn't sure whether they're actual dark feathers. I think so because of the patterning on them. but because they're quite flat in terms of their tone, I wasn't sure, like especially from the back, whether that was supposed to be like a styled and sort of painted metal, like a bronze or something. Not quite sold on the material. So if they are real feathers, get some brighter tones in there, vary them a little bit, because there's a massive variety in feathers. They wouldn't all like be the same tone of brown. It just doesn't quite sell for me. And if it is bronze or some sort of other like dark metal, then push the volumetrics on it. It looks a lot better on this side, to be fair. Also, it might just be the pictures. If so, forgive me. But I think you just need a little bit more variety in those wings. They're such a huge part of like the top end of the model. A bit more attention there would be good. The gold looks really good. Like the rest of the little NMM silvery bits are nice. I like the texture on the leather. The skin's looking really good. So there's a lot going right with it. It could do with a little bit more sort of tones in the face. There's like a big patch on the cheek that's like, I mean, it's the right tones, but it's just not much happening with it. You might just want to shape her cheeks just a little bit more. And then if we zoom in and get really, really harsh, like the eyes are done beautifully, really, really nice. Can't fault the eyes at all. The obvious war paint, I mean, it's war paint, so it's completely stylistic. You can't really argue with that either. So that's all fine. I like the freckles that you've done on there, very soft. You know, it's very easy to overdo those. So that's good. I just thought maybe the black of the face paint was maybe just a bit too black, maybe. But again, that's kind of an optional thing. Like, if they would, I doubt they'd be like tattoos. I think it's actual paint. So even if you just like softened the edges in some places, I think that would be cool. It just looks really, really stark. But again, that's being really, really picky, which is what you need. Then there was the lines between the fingers need darkening, and the fingernails you could probably do a little bit more with. And red tones like around the knuckles, like she's a warrior, she's outside, she probably punches people or, you know, trains quite a lot. A little bit more like wounding or calluses like forming on the knuckles would be good. Just show off your skills a little bit there. And then finally for the leather of like her chest piece, I think there's a few details there that you could pick out a little bit more. But again, it's picky, and it just looks like in general some areas haven't been matted down fully either. Leather's one of them. The other was the cape. So yeah, if it's not been ultra matte varnished, then spray some of that through the airbrush, and that should matte it right down. But yeah, on the whole, really, really nice, and good luck for your competition. Do let us know how you get on. Thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah, she looks amazing, especially that helm. Like, it's so cool the way you've got the different color, like the blue light here, and then it's kind of orangey light, and then there's the way the reflection isn't just a dot. It's like there is some objects out there that we don't know quite what they are. Um, on the face, I think I get what Jim was saying about the kind of lack of contour. I think there is contour there, obviously, and it's very nicely done. I think the problem is, I think it's like her ear or something on her right hand side. There's something or it's a strand of hair or something. But there's something that's brightly lit, like right beside the shadow, beside her jawline, and it makes her face look like flat and weird. So like just hide that away somehow because you do have shading going down there and giving her like a much better like look. I'd also do the lips a lot redder than this. Like not doesn't have to be like lipstick red, but like look at my lips. I don't have very full lips. Look at Jim's lips. Like they are not the color of your skin. They're red. Whereas her lips are basically very slightly redder than her skin, which like doesn't make a huge amount of sense and would just look better if they were more red. On the eye makeup, it's like a very minor thing. You could do like a slight highlight on it, like here and here, where the highlights are on her cheeks. You've done it on her eyelids. It looks amazing. I wouldn't make that a high priority. I'd do the fingers, as Jim said. I do a little bit more work on the back just to give it enough definition and some kind of textury feel to it between all the hairs just to make it look finished. Because the back's it's the least important thing, but you want to have it in a competition. If someone else has an equally good figure as you, but the back of theirs is better, they're going to win. Um, on the NMM, I think it might be the pictures, but her bracer, it looks like the secondary reflection is very big and very bright compared to the primary one. And I don't know if all the rivets and stuff are called out correctly. That could just, it's hard to tell from the angle we're looking at it. And I agree with Jim on the sword that it looks really good, but it's just, if you had like a bit of a shadow up by the hilt, maybe where the hilt is like casting a shadow down onto it, and then if there's some way of getting like an absolute maximum like highlight of the highlight of the highlight just somewhere along the grooves, I think that would just like take it up to like the ultimate level. And then also very minor. I think the her belt doesn't have the same kind of texture as the leather of her bodice, but I didn't notice that apart from that I was zooming in on the sword. And then her hair, just like you've got this texture in it, but I think it's a little bit too stark in places where it's like conforming to the braids. And I think you could just have think about it more like an individual piece in a few places and just get rid of some of those darker lines. But again, I had to zoom in to really see those. Um, so yeah, hopefully that's plenty of stuff. It's already a great looking figure, but if you want to do any of those things, be our guest. Thanks a million, Alexis. We'll see you again soon, and good luck in the competition. Okay, Pablo did an old painting commission for a friend. Just wanted advice on how to improve. Cool, that's what we're here for. It's guy's cool. I don't know if he's like a space marine or an inquisitor or just some sort of very 40k ish guy. Um, I think you've got a very obviously have a very good hand for detail, like all the writing and the little freehand on the scrolls and the literal like calligraphy on his chest is very good. As is the checkerboarding. It's very tidy, especially in the red side of it. The and then and the red line on the inside of the cloak as well. It's very neatly done. I thought the silver paint you're using, I don't know if it's the paint or the figure, like especially around like the collar thing. It's got this real patchy look to it, and then as well around like areas like the rivets that are everywhere. The paint has run over them, and there's no like shadow or definition to show that this is like one piece of metal with a rivet driven into it. So if you could go back with a wash and just like do a little bit there, and then just generally give the metals more of a run of light and shadow because they're quite shiny. But in apart from that, you've basically just got like it's either where the lights hits it or not. I'm not sure the turbo edge highlighting, as I've decided to call it, is necessary. Where he's got that chaos trim, and then you've done the line around the chaos trim, because you're going for like that NMM silver, like it's already drawing a lot of attention. Uh, and it doesn't. It's only really visible on his legs, and it's a little bit kind of weak and faded looking. But I mean, you could work on it if you want to practice your freehand a lot. Um, and then I'd recommend checking out Little Plastic People. He's a guy. He's on PmP as well, but he has like the best plasma coils you'll ever see, really. And he has a video about like doing lenses, and that would look really good for your like glowing vials and for the lens up in the head as well. And I'd also just consider like I'm not sure why his cloak is and like his leather is this kind of desaturated red color, but the gun is this much brighter red, and other places like I mean, it kind of makes sense that it's like a different material, so it's going to reflect light differently and be a bit more drab. But it's a color scheme for a guy, so you might as well give him matching kind of gear rather than just having sort of different reds for not any like stylistic reason, if that makes sense. That's quite minor, but I just kind of prefer that saturated red anyway. And then on the bases, because I'm a base fanatic, the like you've got kind of like a combination of what looks like a city scene with like some mushrooms and some tufts. And the tufts are a bit it looks like static grass, but you didn't use one of those things to make it all stand up. So it looks kind of like it's not sure if it's moss or grass or like tumbleweed or something. So so I would just think a bit like why that is there and how it's growing there. Like it should be coming out of all the cracks. Does that make sense? Not like sitting on top of the the concrete or whatever stone that is, and then working its way around there. But that's like a super minor thing. That's really just me. I think it looks good the way you've done on the base. So that would just kick it up to more of like a diorama kind of level of things. So hopefully there's some useful feedback for you. It's a very detailed, nicely painted model. I'm sure your friend was quite happy with it. You want to add anything on there, Jim?
Not too much. That was pretty comprehensive. I think you've done a great job, especially with the free hands. The highlighting of the cape probably go a little bit further next time. Like, just take the highlights higher. I think that a lot of the shadows is coming from the picture because you have cast shadows in your picture. So next time you're doing pictures, reduce the exposure so you're not getting too much glare from the highlights. But yeah, I think you could just maybe pick out the ridges of the cape a little bit more evenly. But yeah, the rest of it, I think, as Matt said, you've done some bits really well. I think the general like challenge for you moving forward would be to just approach highlighting more volumetrically. So treat each individual element as its own shape, and then highlight and shade it according to how that shape reacts with the light that you're painting in. This is a very generic all-round zenithal light, so wouldn't be too difficult. But yeah, just basically shadow contrast is where I think your biggest area for improvement is. But yeah, it's highlighted nice and evenly, and it's separated quite well. And like I say, like brush control on this text and stuff is outstanding. So yeah, really good job. Thank you, Pablo. Okay, moving up, that looks like Big Mech to me. It is Big Mech, yes, with this cool cartoony style that we saw last month or month before, I think. So the Borderlands style Goblin. It was last month. Banner Grot. Improved the green skin with the warmer shadow. Rusty NMM. And tried out a gold on the belt buckle, earring, and the dagger handle. And blue fur for texture. So, yeah, any more tips? So let's dig in and have a look at it. I like the way the gold looks. You could make the shadows a little bit darker. Go down to like what's it called? Like Doomball brown. Or in extreme cases, Rhinox hide. I'll just use GW because they're just the most, popular, more recognisable names of paint. The dagger blade looks really, really cool. Not sure you would have rust running all the way up to the end of the blade. Down here, most certainly, but yeah, probably dial it back a little bit towards the end of the blade. But it definitely sells what it is, and that is nice. It does make a difference. I like what you've done with the skin effects now, putting the skin tones in there. That's really nice. And the fur effect, I think, sells as well, like this micro hashing detail you've got going on. So it's all very, very good. The only reservation I'd have now, because you're kind of merging having an element of realism to the skin, with soft contrast and transitions and different tones in there, and then you're mixing it with this aggressive black shadow lines everywhere to give you the shadow contrast. I think it is kind of working, but I wonder. I mean, I've not tried this before, so I'm kind of spitballing ideas here. But being as you've got travel in the contrast everywhere else, could you also incorporate some travel in those black lines? So some areas would be darker than others. Mix in, a red or a blue or browns even, just to make some of these black lines a little bit lighter, and then obviously reserve the really black ones for where it would be quite clearly the deepest shadow. Do you know what I mean? Because everywhere else there's nice travel and contrast in it, but just then these black lines. Just an idea. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I like the way this is coming out again. So well done. It's a rough old sculpt in it around the edge, but if there's anything that can be done to tidy up the black line around the rim, that would also be cool, because it's a bit choppy around there. But yeah, other than that, looking good, and I love the attitude on this guy as well, with his red eyes and his big powerful chin. I love him. He looks great. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to say he's my favorite one. I think the Banner Rod is still my favorite one, but I really love how refined the line work is on him. Like it's so thin and so precise. Like those little fur lines you drew in at the back, like looks way better than actual GW fur usually does. Um,
True fact.
you could probably go a bit bolder on the gold NMM if you think about it like a full volume. You can have like half the skull be bright and half it be dark, but and then have the eye sockets be like really dark with like a highlight in there. But that's pretty minor. Like it does look like cartoony gold. Also, his eyes would look really good with like a dark line around the bottom of them, just to really call them out. I think Jim's idea was pretty interesting to have like a slightly different black tone for different areas. So, like, say on these leaves, you could use like a really, really, really dark green, and then his ears could be like a really, really, really dark red, just for yourself to see. I think that is kind of a thing when you look at 3D, or not 3D, digital artists. They can have the lines take on the color of the background or be black, if that makes sense, when they're because it's all in layers. And a lot of the time you will see that where they have, say a leaf, and then the veins of the leaf are this very dark green, but the actual outside of the leaf is actual black, or it might even be a green so dark it looks like black, if that makes sense. Yeah, great work. Lovely seeing these, and like the progression on them is astounding. Uh, so keep it up. Thanks a million for submitting. Next, we got Adam Talbot trying to match the box art for this Death Gesture Harlequin guy, I assume. Looking for feedback. Yeah, no worries. So what should I say here? Yeah, I really like the way you've done the gems on this guy. Very classic look to it. Very typical Eldar look, and the really crisp edges you've got on all the black everywhere. That it really like it because it is this very plain black, and you have to get those edges in perfectly because otherwise it is kind of to make it look correct. Sorry. The kind of diamond pattern on his leg, that's very Harlequin. You've got some like not complete coverage in the white, if that makes sense. Like some of them aren't fully filled in. So you could go back and tidy that up a little bit. Similar to the like Bade freehand on his knee. I'd probably color that in like solidly just to get it a bit more noticeable as well. But it's pretty minor. Um, this isn't like you could optionally as well have the base because the base is quite bright colored. It's like that wraith bone material, but you could have it be like darker towards the bottom, like it's got like weathering or whatever on it, just so that it draws attention up towards the figure because he's quite dark. So if you had like the vertical plane of it goes to like this dark green where it's getting all mossy and stuff, and then it goes to white, and then it's back to him. That'd be a nice look. Um, and as well, the red on him, it's good. It's got a good level of travel. Like it goes from basically black to this really saturated red. But the way it looks like a lot of washing went into it, and the way the shadow has like pooled in certain areas makes it look a bit like kind of dirty more than anything else. Like it looks kind of like a leather couch that hasn't been you know scrubbed in places. Especially on the back is what I'm thinking of. Like it wouldn't really go the whole way to black. I don't think in the shadows, and you can even see on the sculpt itself, like the shadow area under his collar has a highlight in it from the lights in your room. So like that should be red again, if that makes sense. Like just like the overhanging bit of it can go to black because you're saying like no light's getting in there, but then it should go back to red, which wouldn't be a huge amount to just to come back and tidy that up. And then similarly, in between these kind of two studs on his back, like there's a line of darkness, which is where the wash kind of pooled in because of the two studs. But light wouldn't do that. Like that would be just red there. But yeah, and I love the contrast with the blue undercloak. That looks really, really good. Really super fine like lines around there. It is very much in that box art style. And the gold, like particularly on the magazine for the gun, is like and this little skull thing, it looks super good. So I think it looks great. Thanks for submitting, Jim.
Yeah, I agree. Gems and gold look absolutely outstanding. Like that's amazing. NMM, congrats, awesome. The tufts as well. Yes, cutting them down, painting them. They look much better. I think you might have used one or two too many. in this case, personally, but whatever. That's a completely, that's just an opinion. The black highlighting very good. I think you've got some blue in there. You've certainly got it in on the armor. There's like you use like a dark blue to kind of do your first edge highlight before moving into like the grey spectrum, lighter blue. You could definitely do that on the gun as well, I feel. Just because you kind of got flat black gun, and then you've got like one, maybe two levels of highlight. Really, you need three, and the first one needs to be quite a broad blue one, I feel. That would really, really help the black. With a bit more contrast. You could also even use it where, again, as Matt says, the light in your photo is telling you where the highlights need to be, and there aren't any there. It's still just flat black paint. So you can still push some highlight contrast around on this. Very much so. I also agree with Matt about the red. You've got some lovely tones, but too much shadow on the back. You could probably also pick the higher edges out as well. You could either go, I'd probably go up in the orange spectrum for this to contrast nicely with the blue. Sort of going Troll Slayer, Dragon Fire Bright, whatever it's called. Oranges, that'll be a really, really nice way to bring the red up a notch. And then, base wise, I agree. A little bit more weathering, like where these shurikens or ninja stars or whatever have stuck in. Don't know whether that's just happened. Maybe it could look like they've weathered in a little bit. Some water's collected, and maybe even some green that's some lichen or some moss or whatever growing on the stone. Just a little bit more variety to the what we think is stone, not metal base. It's reading more like stone than metal to me. But yeah, on the whole, we're zoomed in here quite aggressively. So when you zoom out and look at the whole thing on the whole, yeah, it's nice. It's got good contrast, got good travel. Just, focusing on those details, man. It's looking good. Thanks, Alan. Okay, moving up to Kelvin, who's got a big white dragon here. 6 hours, very impressive. Try to add shadows and different tones to increase some visual interest, but definitely struggled with maintaining the whiteness of it. Looking for overall feedback on the piece, but also tips on how to make it read as a white dragon rather than some ice silver blue mythical thing, while still adding tones for village interest. That is a tricky one because, to be honest, I think yours looks better than just painting it as a white dragon. You could have some more white in it, sure, but I love the blues, the purple, the greens, that kind of pearlescent kind of feel to it. I think it looks jolly magnificent, to be fair. And I don't think telling you to paint it in the general way of white, which is, start from a dark grey and work your way up to pure white, I don't think that would look any better, man. I think this is much, 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 much nicer. So it's going to be, for me, it's going to be putting more white into what's already here. I love what you've done with this. It looks really, really, really good. So it's going to be a lot of brush work, a lot of patience, a lot of time. And just going in and brightening up some areas of musculature that are facing upwards. So you've got a great run of like shadow contrast in here. It's really, really strong, really, really nice colours. So it's just going to be picking out the highlights, because the thing is with white is it never really reads, it's never really actually white until it's like in its highlights. And because this is such a big, well sculpted, like muscular thing, it's casting a lot of shadow. So pick out where the highlights are and go up to white from there. Don't start with pure white. You want to keep it reasonably low, and then where your highest highlight is, that's where your pure white is. That's it. The rest of it's just got to be varying tones of, I want to say darker white, but you know what I mean, sort of in the greys sort of spectrum, using blues or indeed greens in this case. Even like warm yellows could contrast nicely with like the cold shadow colours of it. So you could go to like ice yellow or dawn yellow or something like that. Really, really extreme highlights though. But yeah, super looking thing. For 6 hours work, I can scarcely believe it, to be honest. It looks absolutely ridiculous for 6 hours work. Then, side note, but again, you haven't spent much time on it. You could probably do a little bit more to define like the wing membranes, like separating from the wing bones themselves. That would be cool. But yeah, for 6 hours work on a piece this big to get this level of interest in it is stunning. Oh, watch out for mild lines. There's quite a few gaps on it as well, so a bit more milliput or green stuff, or even gloss varnish for the really, really thin ones. Yeah, super stuff. Thank you, Kelvin. Keep it up. Matt?
Yeah, I agree. It looks really good. It looks much better than plain white. And it's more interesting. It's more realistic. Like white isn't white. It's highly affected by ambient light. Um, so like one of the issues you run into here is complete lack of context. It's kind of like that blue dress where you're like, is it a blue and black dress or is it a white and gold dress? Because you don't have a base. Like if you put this guy in a snow base, everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, it's a white dragon. Yeah. Whereas because there's nothing else around it, it could be like a blue dragon that's very pale, or it could be a silver dragon. Well, the reason it looks kind of silvery is because you've got the brown in the wings, and it gives it this chrome sky earth kind of look to it. And again, if it was in a snow base, we would be like, oh, it's not a reflection because there's nothing brown to reflect. But yeah, I also agree with what Jim said. Like the placement of the white is very important. Like the face looks like a white dragon with blue shadows, but when you get into like the area in between the shoulder blades, you're like, why is that so blue when it's facing up? Like we should have white light incident on that. It also works well if you're going for this idea that it's like the blue light is coming from the sky, then you should have it then go from like blue into like a warm white and then into a pure white. And that kind of gives us that kind of like sky sun kind of feel to it. But yeah, just a little bit more care on the placement of them because like in some places, like say on the shoulder, the left shoulder, I think you can kind of see the white is literally pointing down, the blue is pointing up. And if you just like flip those around, it would look way better. Um, and I think the pink is like looks great, the pinky purple, because that just kind of looks like it's blood or whatever that's in there, and that'll totally read. But if you just get a little bit more of a handle on the blue, then that'll be fine. But again, it is kind of like almost an optical illusion kind of thing happening. So it's understandable that you're having some trouble with it. And also, you're probably a bit too close to the piece. You're looking at it all the time. If you went up to someone and said, "Hey, what do you think of my white dragon?" They'd probably be like, "Oh, that's really cool," and it wouldn't even occur to them that it is something else. Yeah. Okay. Thanks a million for submitting, Kelvin. And now we've got Francis James Lopez. Painting some sentinels from Marvel Zombies, and then using a bunch of interesting techniques to make them look pretty cool, to be honest with you. So yeah, these are very interesting. They look kind of remind me of the new X-Men cartoon, which I haven't actually watched that much of yet, but they kind of feel like they're like the Sentinels that are all battered up and then have been reanimated. Um, or even like they're from like the Danger Room. The edge highlighting is very like it's interesting that it's yellow and you've kind of highlighted every edge as well, and it makes it feel like they're like holograms or like they're like that's some sort of energy glow coming out of them as opposed to it being like an edge highlight from some light source cast on them. um so yeah, it's obviously a stylistic choice. You want to watch out a little bit in certain places. Your edge highlights are a little bit thick. You want them to be uniform thinness everywhere. I'm sure Jim can point out a few of them to you. And it's hard to do when you have so many on a figure like this. And some of them are going to be better defined than others, and you can get them with the edge of your brush. Others you're going to have to like manually put it in, and it'll be painful and annoying. But that's just to take it up to that next stage. I think that they could do it have maybe a bit more focus sort of up towards the face. Like if you put like dark shadows in around the chin strap and then had like the yellow, because like the yellow in the face is eye catching, but there's so much yellow everywhere else that it makes it a little bit less so. So if you had something where dark colors and then you have this bright yellow in the middle, that would kind of kick it up a bit more, and you could kind of leave out because the other issue is you've got the yellow edge highlights that like run into the face, and that acts kind of like camouflage because you're breaking up the outline of the face by having these lines in the same color coming out of it. But it's still very, very cool looking, and I love the way you've done the OSL. Like it really reminds me of that X-Men cartoon. So yeah, they're super interesting to look at, and all the different techniques you've used on them really set them apart from any other figures you're liable to see on the table. So hopefully that's of some help to you, Jim.
Yes, completely unique. I've not seen anything like this before, where you've chosen a singular seemingly completely disconnected color to highlight everything. But it does create interest. It does make them stand out and pop. So kudos to the weathering and stuff, the stippling and like I think it's blood that's up on there and stuff. That looks really good. How that's been applied. The modulation in the armor panels as well is good. It's well separated. So yeah, I mean, I can't really fault the stylistic, the yellowness of it. I don't really get why it's appropriate as opposed to using, these would look amazing as well if you used like the normal generic method of highlighting them, like with the actual, the run of colors which they're on. I'd love to see how they looked painted like that as well. So if you've got some more, then humour me, because I think you've got some really good skills, man. Yeah, exactly. I think you've got some good skills, like the OSL selling. I'd probably brighten the source up just a little bit on this green one in particular. But yeah, good looking stuff, Francis. Thank you very much. Moving on then to Eben, I think. Really appreciate feedback on the Maw Crusher last month. That was a good one. You're very welcome. So now we've moved on to Lord Croak. So try to focus the eye on the Croak himself using warm colours basically and keeping everything else a little bit dingier. So how do I keep focus on the figure without the rest looking unfinished? I don't think you need to be honest. I think you're in a pretty sweet spot with this. There are a lot of people that would have done less than what you've done, like with the far ends of it, like the top end and the bottom end of it. And we're zoomed in on this big on my screen's massive, all blown up and stuff, and it looks super. Like, I can't really fault like the lighting of it. The attention is in the right place. You've done exactly the right thing, keeping this like orb of warm color around him, and then like the shock of color on that feather. That's where all the attention is. But then you've got this, this square of very, very bright green as well, framing the Croak as well, right in the middle. He's got a good level of contrast in him, so it's all great. I mean, I love the soft travel that you've got in the rest of the tones. On the piece further away from him, like the metals and like the jade statuey bits and the gold elements, even like the texture and the color and the life that you've got in the rocks. It's very, very lively rock. I love that. Yeah, not really much I could add to it really. I mean, there are some edges that you could potentially pick out. Some of these cracks would catch a light reflection. Some of the edges of some of the sharper stone carvings would probably catch reflection, but as you say, you want to keep the I love what you've done with the bones as well. They look really, 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 really good. You want to keep the attention on the Croak, but I still think some subtle highlighting. Doesn't have to be every edge on every element. Just pick out a few places where you could maybe brighten it up a bit, but really not too much, man. I think this looks absolutely super, to be honest. Did I have anything else? No, it's really nicely balanced, and I wouldn't get too hung up on, detailing the rest of it around the Croak. I think you did a super job, and I wish I could be more helpful, to be honest. But personally, for me, I think you've done a wonderful job here. Really, really nice. So, thank you for submitting. Well done.
Yeah, I think, and like you've obviously pulled out all the stops by doing like everything. You're separating with value contrast and with temperature contrast and with contrast of detail, like contrast of contrast as well. So like this is one of the busiest figures that's ever been made, and it's incredibly easy for things to get lost, and we've reviewed it a bunch of times, and that's what we normally say, but you've done a really good job of making us actually look at Croak here. Like, from the front angle, you don't even notice his little buddy beside him, so you're doing a good job there. For what it's worth, I think that the headdress with just the one feather is a little bit better, because I just think that all the feathers kind of like, it makes you look at his feathers and then him in the back of the feathers, if that makes sense, for whatever reason. I don't know. I just prefer the singular feather. I think it works better. But, you've got both, so who cares? And then, yeah, I get what Jim was saying that you could highlight some edges here and there. I think probably the seat behind him could be a bit darker because it's behind him. Because what you've effectively showing us is that like there's a spotlight on him, which is exactly what you want. Like it's like he's the light, like the light is just on him personally, and for whatever reason, the other stuff's in shadow, and that's good because that's what you want us to look at. So his seat would obviously be very dark because he's casting the shadow on that. And then what you could do if there's like any of these little edges of the stone or whatever that you think needs more paint on it, I would highlight the edges that face towards Croak. Because it's like the light's hitting him and coming out, and then you're going to get all these concentric circles around him that will again focus the eye in. But like that's a very minor thing. You could also, if you wanted, if you feel like, oh, it kind of just fades into obscurity. You could add some little like Easter egg details somewhere. Like you could have like a little pond on the base with a fish in it that's like nicely detailed but small and doesn't draw too much attention, just so that if anyone's looking at that area, that's what they decide to focus on. But yeah, like Jim said, you did a really great job of making us actually able to see Croak in the Croak figure. A lot of the time you can. So good work, Evan. Hopefully that's helpful to you. And thanks a million for dropping your figure in there for us to look at. Ordinary Molasses is back, trying to get better at OSL. Had issues with it being too bright and extending too far. That's like the number one issue everyone has with OSL, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't worry about it. Try to tone it down in this area, in areas that would be not in direct sunlight. Cool. Aside from that, spend a lot of time trying to get the face looking good. All right, cool. I think the OSL here is way better. Like it's much more like you've got the hammer is like it's mostly like it's a really good looking, by the way, heated metal effect. I love the way the corners of it are like cold. Like when you see like someone working in a forge, that's what happens. Like the corners and the edges cool down quicker, because they've got more surface area. And then like the fact that you got the white is in the middle of the chaos star, like that is really good. Um, the OSL is like pretty minimal and works. Like, yes, it's casting some light on his shoe and some on his leg where it would be in shadow. So that's great. I'm not sure it's 100% necessary on the to have the glow from the plasma coils. It's not wrong. Like it's in an area that would be lit up, but there's already a lot of stuff going on there. So you could just like leave it off and be like, yeah, and it'd be a bit more clear, like what's the because he has that fur cloak and then it goes into like some looks like intestinal tubing or something, but because it's all pink it makes it kind of hard to tell where one ends and the other starts. If that makes sense. So I don't think it's necessary there. I don't think it looks bad though either, and I think the plasma coil glow looks quite good on the actual gun itself. Then yeah, so the face, the skin, like I mean, we're looking at it very, very zoomed in, but it looks a little bit like chalky kind of texture to it. A lot of skin paints have a lot of white in them, and the pigment is quite big, so that can kind of happen, especially if you're doing a lot of layers on it. Sometimes kind of less is more. Also, I don't know if you did the trick where most Space Marines, what people do is they take their head off and they just do it on like a cork or whatever, and you paint the head and they just slot it in and it hides the join, and then it make it a lot easier to do. And what you want to kind of do as well is give him like strong shadows around his jawline and like under his cheekbones because of all the like shoulder pads and stuff. It like makes that get dark, and that'll give his face a lot more definition. I like the way you've done the hair. Like he's got this kind of stubbly stuff, but I think that could be stronger. Like it's very kind of like washed out and similar to the skin tone. Whereas, you know, he's got black hair, I assume, and it's got a bit of growth on it. You can go more to make it more clear. It's like that's his hairline. It's not just like his skin is a little bit darker in that area. Um, and then I think he did a good job like dotting the eyes and everything in there. You could have a little bit more red into like the nose and the cheekbones, but again, it's kind of hard when it is a very small thing. Look up Darren Latham. Are his videos still online? He definitely
Yes.
had a bunch of
Yeah,
videos
they are.
where he
Yeah.
did specifically. I mean, he did essentially this face because it's just some Space Marine face, and he'll show you exactly where you want to put everything. And he does it that way, where he just has the head on its own, and it makes your life a whole lot easier. But yeah, it's a good looking figure, and thanks for dropping it in, Jim.
Yeah, I'll stick with the face. I think one of the main things, I think, is the way you've done the eyes. You've painted the white of the eye, and then you've painted the black in the eye. Whereas what you need to make the eyes stand out is you need a black line like around the eye socket. So I'm gonna say the only way. Never say the only way. It's a very dangerous phrase, but a very popular way of doing it is to actually start by painting the eye socket very, very dark. Probably not neat black, but mix some brown and some black, or some blue and some black, so it's very, very, very dark. Get the shape of the eye right with that, and then you need to go in with a lighter, like an ivory color or a very light gray, to paint the white of the eye, but leave some of that initial black showing as like an outline of the eye socket. So that does two things. Firstly, it gives you the frame of the actual eye itself, but the white of your eye is actually, it seems to be just as bright as the glint highlight as well. Same for the teeth. It's too bright a white. You don't want to be going anywhere near that. If you look at actual eyes, like, they're not anywhere near like pure white. You see what I mean? Like the eyes and the teeth. The glint reflection needs to be a pure white, absolutely. But try those two things for painting eyes, and that will instantly make the face more recognizable. And then I think I agree with Matt, like, it's very desaturated and washed out, so try and get a little bit more sort of highlighting across the T. Paint some eyebrows as well. Hell, why not? Like, most people don't bother painting Space Marine eyebrows on, but they haven't all had their facial hair burned off. Give him some eyebrows to frame the eye again like that, and get some more highlighting on like the T of his face, so it's kind of, tops of the eyes, tops of the cheekbones, and then sort of down the middle to the chin. And see how you go with that, because you've got a good amount of skill that's gone in like the rest of the figure. Painting faces is a pain in the butt, but it's definitely worth spending the extra time and learning. And with the OSL, yeah, I agree with Matt says. What Matt says, it definitely sells. You've got it in, good positions for the most part. I think the where it's shining up on the arm is probably best. Where it's shining down to the foot, probably not quite so much, because it falls off very quickly from this step, So and I wasn't sure whether this bit was supposed to be OSL either. But yeah, there's just a few areas like on the ground where the area of effect needs to fade out more gradually. But yeah, great effect on the molten weapon. That looks good, and the plasma. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff on this. Really nice work. Thank you very much for submitting. And then moving up to Sasha. I just tried to keep the colours of this lady with a standard relatively saturated. Relatively? Okay. I'd hate to see your very saturated red. My eyes would bleed. Trying to go like a bit like 300. We all know that film. Great effects. And then for the mutants, wanted like the skin flesh is the main effect. So let us know what you think. So yeah, it's definitely very, very bold, very, very striking red. You've painted that well. I will say, small disclaimer, these pictures are quite overexposed and blurry at times. So if some of this advice seems a bit off, then I do apologise. Just try and steady up the focus of the picture next time you're doing them. The lighting's pretty good. It's just slightly overexposed, so it's kind of blowing the detail out a little bit. But anyway, yeah, you've done a great level of detail with like the scrolls, the tufts on the base and the skulls and that. They all look pretty good. I would probably trim the tufts. Like, you don't need to like unstick them from the thing and put them straight on the base. You can cut them up. There's absolutely no reason why not. Have different sizes, different shapes of tufts, rather than just going, yep, there's one, there's one. I know they vary the size of them on the base or on the paper that they come from, but still, you've got the small ones, the medium ones, the big ones. Get your hobby knife out, slice them up, make some really, really tiny ones. Really good way to add interest with tufts. It looks like you painted them though, I think. You've painted them. But yeah, I think she looks good. On the whole, you could maybe just push volumetric highlighting on like the area of the leg that's showing here. Look, there's a highlight on the photo from your actual light in the room. So you could definitely push a highlight right at the middle of that thigh. But yeah, I think she looks pretty good as a standard bearer in general. Nice work. And then for the red beastie things, I have no idea what these are, but they look gnarly and gruesome and bloody. and suitably gross. So nice work. They are very glossy. I'm not sure whether that's deliberate because they're supposed to be like really bloody. But maybe you could matte down the areas that are not covered in blood. That would kind of be cool. And then with blood as well, you can, if you're using like blood for the blood god or whatever other generic blood-based effects paint, you can, to make it look really fresh, you can mix in black with it as well, and it makes it look like a really like the lifeblood of something. You know, if someone's been hit in, like in an organ, it's really deep dark blood. So you can vary the blood up that way as well. Get a little bit of black, wet blend it in with the blood paint. That looks awesome when people do that. So that's good. But yeah, I think generally like the highlighting on them is pretty good. You picked up the muscle structures and that quite nicely. Just the claws looks a little bit flat on this one here. So maybe if you could do something to sort of shape those, give those a bit of interest. Maybe shift the colour as well because they're quite pale, as well like with the skin. So maybe make them a bit darker like you have with the scales and the horns on this guy. That would be quite cool. But yeah, in general, nice work, Sasha. I hope you find that helpful. Matt?
Yeah, I think your tactic of using the saturated red, reserving it for the areas we want focus to be on, like worked extremely well. Um, the beastie flayed skin effect also looks great. Not sure if Jim said this or not because I kind of just completely zoned out for a minute there. But I kind of like the yellow eyes. It looks a little bit like, I don't know if you were going for a glowing eye or if it's just you had some paint spilled over there. But I think the eye that doesn't have that looks better because it's just like having that dark shadow and then the bright yellow just for the eye. Like it really pops out and really reminds you of something from like Doom or something like that. But yeah, very cool thematic figures. I don't know where they came from, but I really like them. Good kind of Mutant Chronicles feel to it too. So they should look pretty great on the table or on the shelf or wherever it is you're planning on keeping them. So thanks, Sasha. Good work on the old figures. All right, Stephen Banks, another large project. Yes, one of the largest ones. Trying to get greater contrast in the TMM and the skin needs a bit more work maybe. And yeah, doing a giant. Good idea. Okay, cool. So what do I have to say here? Yeah, good work. This guy's a big undertaking because like he's one figure, but he's actually like 8 figures in a car. So it's a lot of painting to have to do. I really like the kind of purple to pink transition you've got going on, like on the curtains and stuff. It's really nice and thematic, obviously for Slanesh. Uh, the all the gold trim stands out well from the surrounding areas. It's very tidy and like defines everything very well. And it's a very rich gold. You can see, especially in the like the kind of yoke, like the thing that's in the middle of that the two like beast of burden guy. It's got a really strong gold like color to it, so that's very nice. And the marble effect on the guy, it's cool. I think you could go a bit further if you wanted to. It's a bit like limestoney looking, if that makes sense, which is fine because limestone is just marble waiting to happen. But if you look up like reference for marble, it tends to have very strong contrast between the lines. So you could go further, but I don't think you need to. I think it looks like it almost looks kind of like that plaster they put up inside a church, to be honest with you, as well. Like in other places where they didn't use marble. So yeah, it's a good look. Um, I think in some places, like the snake, it's a little bit like monotone. I don't know. It's not doesn't look like it has the marbling effect on it. It's just kind of white, and especially its underbelly is the same white that the top is, which looks a little bit weird. So I'd add more, even if you just want to get that kind of greenish tone that you used around the edges, and just like wash that in and just give a little bit more interest and kind of contour to the snake. I think that would kick everything up a little bit. Looking at a bunch of the other little figures and all those fiddly details in there, you might want to try out, if you haven't before, using oil washes. Because that's a really great way. If you look at like his food on his plate and like the lady beside him with all her scars and stuff, like you can get a dark brown oil wash and put it over everything, and it'll just like sink into all those crevices, like the way they tell you acrylic wash does, but it doesn't. And it'll sink in and just define all those things and give you that separation, which is awkward when you have like so many elements like stacked on top of each other, like the one's peacocky dress thing, it'll just ring all of those and just bring them out for you. Then you can use the same wash on like everything, and it'll give a unified kind of shadow color. So that'd be cool. Um, because yeah, the gold, like while the gold has a very nice, rich kind of hue to it, and you've got some silver kind of highlights to it, that could also just like kick it up a little notch. You could also go for a reddish brown wash on a gold. That tends to look very good, and it'll sink into all those panels and separate them out for us when we zoom in. Because like obviously you've painted it tidily, and like from the macro view of the whole figure, the gold is well defined and separated. But like when we look at say the guy in the armor, you have the edge highlights in the silver, but you don't have like the extreme. There is some shading obviously in there, but you could have just a little bit more. But yeah, that's something that happens when you're painting one figure, but it's like 12 and a whole buffet as well. So great work on this. I also really like how you have the. I never noticed before that he has like a little stove behind him, and like the snake is actually a chimney. So good work calling out that detail and making it like really pop in the back. Jim, you want to finish it off?
I haven't got much to add on top of that, really, that you haven't already said, apart from on the skin. So, like on the Beastie Burdens and on Jabba the whoever at the back. I don't know who this is. I'm sorry. Yeah, this school. It's a really really great place that you've started from. Like base tone, like really rosy, Caucasian. It's great, but push these highlights, man. These guys are alien and they're sort of they look kind of like sickly, diseased almost. They need to have more of an like a not undead particularly, but less rosy pinky. I think you need to take this up and contrast with the purple into like very pastel green and yellow highlights up on the skin. The highlights on the skin need to be brighter anyway, but you can also choose which hue you want to go with. And I'd be more aggressive with the highlighting on him to make him stand out a little bit more in this very busy and sparkly, shiny, opulent setting that he's in. And I think the main way to do that is going to be to push the contrast on his skin and bring it up. But then obviously these guys are huge and would catch big highlights as well. So yes, that would be if I was going to go somewhere to improve it, that's where I'd be. Then I was going to say with the marble, yeah, kinda, but I think the effect that you've kind of painted in is a bit samey, if that makes sense. So it's the same intensity of line in the same direction, in the same size, a bit too much. Do you see what I mean? Try and vary like the directionality, the depth of them, the darkness of them, the length of them, everything. There's areas where you've got more variety than others, but more often than not, it's that length in that direction at that intensity, if you see what I mean. So just try and vary that up next time. But it does look like marble, yes, but if you wanted to go a little bit further, that's what I'd recommend to make it go that way. But like if this thing was on the table rolling towards you, I'd be very happy with how that looks. It's a very busy, difficult, complicated piece, and I think you've done it justice, and you should be very happy with it as it is anyway. So yeah, I hope you found that helpful, Stephen, and that's the end, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely. So thanks very much to everyone who submitted their figures for the review, and thank you for sticking through to the end of the video. And as always, we'll see you next month for our next monthly review.